Donc, bienvenue. Je vais prendre très peu de votre temps pour introduire le panel qui s'intitule « Les tierces parties, le maillon faible ». Et je suis honoré de pouvoir recevoir sur notre stage en ce moment Maryam ASGARIZAD, qui est le VP and CISO of Alterna Savings Alitana Bank. We have Mainak VAIDYA, who is VP Head of IAM. Thank you. We have Patrick LAROUCHE, who is Manager of the Supply Chain Integrity Program au Centre canadien pour la cybersécurité. Monsieur LAROUCHE. And I'm going to leave you in the very, very capable hand of your moderator for this session. He's Matthew ROSENQUIST. He's a moderator, CISO, cybersecurity strategist, industry advisor. And with this, Matthew, it's your panel.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. We have got everyone's favorite topic, third-party risk. And this is an area that affects each and every one of us. There's not a company out there that isn't dealing with a supplier, a vendor, a partner, or another company downstream that you're trying to provide for that has questions for you. It is a complex topic that is continually changing in our industry. So we are fortunate today to have our panelists here. We're going to talk a little bit. We're going to talk about the problems. We're going to talk about some relevance and even some recommendations. But most of all, what I'm looking forward to is actually getting your questions. The value here today is not necessarily what we think is important, but it's the challenges you have. That's what's most important. So I am looking forward to your questions, and we get to grill these three panelists. So let's do that today. Everybody in? All right. So, the first question to my panelists is, how do you see the threat landscape here? Is this really a challenge that we should be talking about today? Or is this something that we'll have resolved, it'll be done, and we won't have to worry about it? How big of a problem is this?
I think it's one of the rising problems in cybersecurity today, right? So I'll talk about this in twofold. One, from the interest that the regulators today are showing on this topic, right? You see the regulations getting tightened, you see the requirements changing, you see the laws coming in for this topic, especially after the pandemic. So definitely a pervasive issue, definitely a very important issue. From a statistics perspective, if you see, 62% of the cyber attacks or data breaches today are happening because of third-party vendors, right? So that's a huge number. It's more than 50% of the data breaches. So I would say it's definitely a very important topic from a cybersecurity landscape, I would say.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with you. It's extremely important when we look at on the news and what's happening. I can make an example of movie data breach that happened in May. So that was a zero-day vulnerability that led to the escalation of privilege and getting access to the unauthorized access to the system, and the system was the file transfer software. So when we look at when that happened, it's impacted more than 60 million people and 2,000 organizations. When you look at the list of organizations in that victim list, is very wide range of organizations, from health sector, from financial institute, from government entity, and it's very different geolocation. Europe was impacted, North America was impacted. So when we look at this spectrum, we get the sense of how significant is this risk and how impactful could be to all of us.
So I think the problem is not going away. This is real. We see it across all sectors, going from healthcare, we saw it in the pandemic, we see it in the finance sector, the energy sector, so it's across all sectors. One of the way to see it is that, with our the way we are so dependent on technology, personally, but also business are all interconnected with their provider, their service provider, the cloud, all the interconnectivity of business nowadays, plus our dependency to that technology makes it really, we're dependent on that. And threat actor knows that, and they will target that. So for them to target a specific service provider or equipment, get them access to all these companies. So it's a big problem. There's a way to work on it. I'm sure we're going to talk about it now. But from a purely, it is a real problem, and we, yeah.
Can you guys talk about the scope, right? Third party is a great buzzword, but what does third party really mean? Does it mean your software vendors? Does it mean the downstream party that you may be outsourcing your HR to, or your payments or billing? What is kind of that scope when we say third party risk?
I'll start. So it's all of it. To me, it's all of it. It's about the criticality of all those service or equipment you're procuring. So the way we do it in the Government of Canada, my program I manage, is we look at all the equipment that the Government of Canada procure, and we do a risk assessment, a supply chain integrity risk assessment on this equipment to come up with a risk level of those equipment. So for us, we're looking at the equipment, but from a normal business point of view, it's all of it. So you need to think about that. Also, there's the third party, also has third party. So how deep do you go? That's one of the biggest challenge right now, is how deep can you go? And then you need to factor in the value of all this. How much value of digging more? So therefore, you need to focus on the most critical one. You need to look at, okay, first you need to know who are your third party. And like the question is, right, it's important because the organization needs to define what exactly are third party. Who are those providers? Is this the equipment, the software we're buying, the network gear that we have, all the security appliance is really critical. So you need to look at all this, and then to figure out the criticality. Which one is critical from our organization? And then from there, then there's a serious thing you can do. But I'll leave it at that for this one.
I think, yes, I'll concur to what Patrick said. And for me, anything that's outside the organization, right, that's not owned by the organization is third party. I would even include a contractor working for the organization, which is on the payroll of some other organization, is also a third party for us. Example, today, I'll match a recent cyber attack with this topic. So if you look at a company who's providing you staff, right, you need to know how strong their background checks are. Right, the person that's coming onto your premises or working for you on your VPN, how good that person is, how safe are we working with that person? Now, let's say if Okta was your identity provider, right? Just touching the recent topic, if Okta was your identity provider and looking at the recent breach, if this third-party person who was working for you could have been one of the reasons why the details in the support system were exposed, etc. Right? So it's very important to, like Patrick said, to identify your third parties. Another important topic that I feel is very critical today is, yes, the nth party, right? So the third party, the fourth party, the fifth party, you don't know how much outsourcing is happening. So it's very important to drill down onto that topic as well. So yeah, I think over to you.
Yeah. No, I agree with everything my peers said. When we look at the third party, if you look at the risk of third party that could impose to our organization, is that we have several impact: financial impact, reputational impact, compliance and regulatory impact, even operational impact. If we are relying on them for the critical services, they can cause us disruption for our services. So if you look at all the risk, it gives us idea of about everybody who at some point providing any services or have access to our system, it could consider as a third party, and the risk is real.
So in general, it is every appliance you have, every piece of hardware, firmware, every operating system you use, every application on top of that operating system, and anything that's holding, storing, transmitting your data. All the cloud services that you're using, And don't forget your other vendors that you may not even be thinking about, right? What about your cleaning crew? Is there a vulnerability there? Maybe. So the scope that we really look at, and it's not just that first order, they also have vendors and suppliers. And if you give one your data, they may be sub-processing that out to other vendors. Okay, so the problem is, well, it's ugly. It's huge. So here's my question to the panelists. Who's responsible for understanding this problem? As you mentioned, you have to understand those vendors. You have to list them, catalog them, write them down on a piece of something. But who's responsible for that risk in today's businesses?
That's $1 million question. I think it's a teamwork in the organization. But from what I'm seeing is that everybody has a role to play. And it's very important that organization have the policy defined for the TPRM program with the roles and responsibility, because everybody in the organization have a role to play. Let's look at from the board perspective. They have visibility on the risk. They have to look at the how a program is being managed, what are the mitigation strategy for those high critical risk vendors. So they have a role to play. Senior management has a role to play. Enterprise risk has a role to play, down to the business line who's managing the relationship for the whole life cycle. So everybody has a role to play, compliance, security team, they do the due diligence. So it's a very enterprise program which requires to have a governance body in the organization to be successful.
Again, completely agreed, but I think I'll change the question a little, right? So instead of calling it a responsibility, I would look at whose accountability is it to
That's
ensure...
an ugly word, right?
Yeah, to ensure that the vendor is safe to work with. So I think, one, I wish I could give the answer saying, it's vendor's responsibility. You have to ensure security for us. But no, I think because we are accountable, we have to ensure that the assessments are done correctly, that the vendor is safe to work with, etc. Coming to within or intra the organization, I think you are right, Maryam, in saying that the entire organization is responsible. But again, I would still, maybe I can give an example, right? Recently, so there was a business line who got us a vendor, and the software was at the beta level, right? So it was a beta software. They didn't even enter the production phase, and the business wanted to onboard the software. So that's something that business should be aware of, the business should be educated about. So this brings to the same topic that you said, right? It is an all-round responsibility within the organization, and everyone should be educated and aware enough to ensure that the TPRM program or the entire setup is secure and well managed.
So yes, I agree, totally agree. It's a collaborative effort in the organization. You need top up, backing. You need the high level to not only approve it, but this is about the culture, the cybersecurity culture, right? This is a team sport. So you need everybody's buy-in, and having the top level of the organization is really important. It's going to help over everybody going through that, but more in the practical way here. I think having a team dedicated to that is really important. And then we talk with a lot of people, a lot of organization, and they often just put people in the cybersecurity team to do that, and it's a side job for them. They do it once in every couple of weeks, and this is the reality. But again, you need the top back up, because you need to fund those things. You need to fund those teams, those people that are going to spend their time on this, and the investment is going to be. It's a business. It's business value versus supply chain value versus risk, right? It's a risk calculus. So the other thing that's really important also is you need to have your procurement team really involved into that. Cybersecurity, we know that. I'm not going to go there. We know why, and they need to be there because mitigation is going to go through them, and there's a lot of reason why they need to be involved into that. But the business line, when they want to buy a product, they might not do the SCI. They might say, "Oh, that's not don't need third-party risk assessment on that. We'll just go with." But they need to go to procurement, And when they go to procurement, procurement's going to say, did you do your assessment? And then they're going to say, oh, no, but we don't need it. Yes, you need it. And up the top, they said we need to do those. So then their procurement are really important to that because they're going to be your gatekeeper, basically. So they're going to help you. And then, you know, it's a culture thing. So then the business owner, they like this product, they've been using it, they want to do it, they're going to buy it anyway, and that's the one they want. But this is an internal discussion that then you can have and start going on. So.
The challenge, again, it's big, it's complex. I think we've heard from everybody, they repeat, it's a team effort. Yes, security, yes, IT, yes, procurement, yes, executive management and support. They all have a role to play. And how many engineers do you have out there that just suddenly decide, hey, I want to sign up for this service, or I want to bring this code in, this third-party code, let me drop it in GitHub or something like that. So we have end users that are potentially part of the problem and maybe even part of the solution. But with something so big and so vast, it is impossible to think that we could protect everything equally. So how do we prioritize what we go after first, what we need to keep an eye on, right? What is your thoughts on prioritizing and managing the risk? Because we don't have infinite resources, right? What are your thoughts?
I think the first thing is the acceptance that you will never cover 100% of the landscape, right? There will always be something that you miss out, right? So every organization, I feel, should go back to the drawing board, hit the fundamentals. I think take the risk-based approach, like you said. It's always the basics of likelihood were multiplied by the impact of what we are looking at. Also, it's very important to identify the sector that you are in, right? A financial organization's landscape of risks would be very different from a healthcare organization. So it's important you know your risks. Of course, there are transversal risks across all sectors, but it's very important to identify your top risks depending on the types of businesses that you have in the organization, etc. So for me, I think it's the fundamentals, going back to the drawing board, taking a risk-based approach, and then having a good we're on speaker now. Having a good incident response in place after knowing the risk priorities.
Yeah. I can echo that. I think it's fixed. I think I agree with that. I think this should be part of TPRM programs. So the way that organization should do it is has to have a risk-based approach, as we discussed. And as we said, this should be an ongoing activity and ongoing monitoring in place. So I know this sounds exhausting and frustrating because it's like organization relying on hundreds of thousands of suppliers and vendors. So I think the first step is to have a tier approach, like look at the knowing the limitation we have for the resources and the time that we have. We put our effort and resources on the vendors that have that provide us with the critical services and also have access to critical sensitive data and system. So I think that's going to be your main tier, first tier that you're addressing. And then slowly from that, when your program gets mature, you get a chance to look at the rest of the vendor. But that's the key to make sure that tiering the vendors, knowing that which one are more high critical, and then looking at that through the risk.
To add to that, this is really good. To add to that, I think the criticality is everybody's. It's not fit for all, right? It's everybody's different. You all have your critical vendor, and you need to identify that. That's something you can do. But then about the resourcing and all this, once you come up with the critical one, you start by the top one, and you need to start somewhere. You need to do it. It's not about how much you're going to do, but you need to do something about it. You need to build a program. You need to build a methodology that you're going to do, and then you're going to do it to all of them. And then I would even say you need multiple methodology, because you need the critical ones. Might have to talk to the vendor. But the second tier, you might say, I'm not going to talk to the vendor, but I'm still going to do, this is not the critical product or service that we're getting, but I'm still going to do some research on it. I'm still going to look at my tools. So that's the other thing we didn't talk about, but you need to have some tools. You need to have some subscription that you can look at the company. Who is this company? What's their what's kind of their business practice that we say, or do they have a lawsuit? Do they have, are they under a forget the word here, but so you need to look at the business you're dealing with. So for us, our methodology, we look at the vendor confidence. That's just one assessment by itself. Is this company, who is it? Who owns them? Who's their CEO? Who controls them? Are they foreign? And if they are they under the foreign influence? And can they be? And where is it going to sit in my network? Do I want this company that might have foreign link in the core of my network, or even worse, where I do all my research and my IPs are sitting? So all of these are fairly simple when we talk about it, but that's what you need to do. You need to look at that. That's what criticality means. What's your crown jewels? You need to protect that. But we used to protect it just by putting firewalls and making sure, access control. Now you need to make sure that if you're going to do this really specific research, we had a case where we had a education sector organization who reached out to us. And they told us, well, we have a question to the Cyber Center how to mitigate this, because there's this company from a foreign country who's offering us free equipment for one of our really, really important research in genome sequencing research. So then, just the fact that they come to us, we're happy that they start to realize, but then we told them, well, how important is it for you? So it's one thing to mitigate and to segregate a network and all this. And they say, oh, by the way, also all the support is included, and they have their own people coming in to do the support. So those kind of things happen, and it can happen in your organization because people don't always see the risk there because it's known product. So those are all things you need to look at, but it's challenging from a resource perspective. So I'd say my biggest suggestion would be just start doing it, start develop something, start to have people working on that, start to do it and do the top one, the most important one in your organization, and also a lot of education. So that's one thing we do a lot now, more and more, is to educate people about these new cyber supply chain or third-party risk, because they're real, and the more people know in your organization, the more they're going to know when they buy a software to do like accounting, they're going to say, okay, yeah, because they don't know right now, but if it's not just a cybersecurity thing, so yeah.
Well, I think akin to cybersecurity, and that's my background, right? There's always, when we talk about managing risk, there are tools, there is processes, and there's behavior or people aspects to it. And I don't think that this is any different, to be honest. And that you probably already have some aspect of a supply chain, whether you realize it or not. You're probably patching your operating systems or some applications in your environment right now. That's a supply chain security control, right? So it's not completely out of the world. You're already doing that, but now the scope has gotten much, much bigger. So the question to the panelists, and you started here, if you could only give a couple of best practices, and I like the one that you said, just start, you're going to learn, you're going to get the right people involved, you're going to make mistakes. But can you give me a couple of recommendations, top recommendations for the audience? What do they need to do from this point moving forward?
Number one is learn. You need to learn more about it. You need to come up with the list of your suppliers, and then you need to rate them as top and bottom and the criticality of them. And once you've done that, then you need to develop a methodology or use a methodology or a product to start to do some sort of risk assessment on that company. And you're going to need some tools. So you're going to need to spend money here. You're going to have to have subscription.
It's not free?
It's not free. I wish. But so, especially for organization, right? But then you need to look at the company itself. Like, it's a bit of a threefold thing. You need the sensitivity, the vendor confidence, and then also the deployment detail. Where is it going to sit and all that? So you need to look at all this. But I would say that the main thing really is to come up with a list of vendors that you, third party that you use, categorize them, start developing a methodology, and then start doing it, start using it. I think that would be the main one.
I think, so let's say we already have a matured third-party risk set up for the organization, right? It's very important to then, as a best practice, right, to have a very strong understanding of the existing and the emerging threat landscape, right? To know the emerging threats, to know how the cyber crimes are happening these days, to predict how it could happen, I don't know, 2 years down the line, and grow your program in that direction is very important. I think that's one of the best practices that I think we should implement. That's one. Second, from a tooling perspective, like you said, right, it's to perform security, we need tools, we need technology. So I guess I would divide it into two parts. One is the GRC side of it, and one is the contractual side of things, right? So I could give an example like Archer. I think everyone knows Archer. So maybe implement a tool like Archer to manage the GRC side of the things. And of course, definitely have the automation side, automation on the contractual side of things, right? Example, contract lifecycle management. It's very important. And I think one more thing is I know it's a cyber topic, but it's very important that the talent that you have in the team, in your program, understands how to communicate with the vendors, understands how to negotiate with the vendors, right? Because it's very important. Tomorrow, I identify a threat or a risk on the vendor side. I need to be able to convince the vendor that, you know, this is a risk and this has to be mitigated, otherwise it's a no deal, right? Because vendors, in my experience, they all defend the risks, the threats that you identify for them, and they're always going to push back. So that's important.
Yeah, I think we all touched base on the most of the point I can think of. One of the study I read online that was interesting was that 45% of organizations still relying on the manual spreadsheet to track and assess their third party. And I think that's reality. Is just this is very time consuming, and the data shows that this is not working. As we said, the TPRM program should be ongoing assessment of day-to-day, like the third party, and managing that relationship through the whole life cycle. There are tools for third-party risk assessment platform out there. They brought great automation in place. They have workflow. They have collaboration with the third party. You can do automation to just respond and address those findings that you find about them. It's scalable. They also provide you with the ongoing monitoring. They also have modules, some of them, that give you visibility on the fourth party and fifth party, which all know that they're very important, because how much of their third party you can capture through the contract and, you know, getting to know them. So those are some of the tools and technology out there that you can leverage. Some of them also even use some methodology to help quantify the financial impact of possible data breach. So that helps you understand that who are the most critical vendors. So give you reporting metrics that you can provide to executives. So they're going to help you like ease up the process, I guess.
And I'll add one of my own in here. And it's probably going to be very unpopular. Leverage your employees, every single one of them. You do need to have a team. You do need to have a process to do this. But just like the rise of shadow IT, the sprawl of bringing in other vendors by various employees, engineers, architects, and so forth, it happens, and it happens a lot. And if you can convince and make every employee part of that to understand the risk and know about the process, and even make it easy for them to go through the process, you can avoid a lot of pain. You can get in front of a lot of those vendors and third parties that you didn't know about and you may not know about until something bad happens. You can get in front of that. So leverage, if you can, all of your employees, especially those with the permissions to bring in code or sign up a vendor or, you know, use another product out there through your firewalls. It helps. Okay. So now let's talk about some mistakes. Now, I'm sure none of you or your organizations have made a mistake in this area. So we're not talking about your organizations. Of course not. What mistakes have you seen in the industry that you would advise, don't do this?
I think some of the mistake is that trust, without verifying. Some of the relationship in the past, I've seen that, oh, the company is a big name, they probably have robust control. Or that organization using them, this organization using them, let's assume that they have proper control and posture and control in place. So I think not assume anything and just validate everything. That's going to be my advice, because it doesn't matter. When we look at the list of all the breaches in the past years, there are some big names there. So it could happen to anybody. So the fact that there are big names or they seem to be reputable doesn't mean that I shouldn't do my due diligences.
I think I'll start with concurring with what she said. Implementing zero trust, if I would say, for third parties is the best way to go ahead. But for me, one of the biggest mistakes that I have seen in the industry, right? I'll not take names, but the focus is so much on onboarding of third party and doing assessments when we are onboarding, or continuous assessment during the life cycle is good. It's the focus. But sometimes organizations miss out on focusing on the offboarding of the vendors, right? That is one of the biggest mistakes I've seen. Third parties or fourth parties still have access to the data of the organization after the offboarding has happened. Sometimes the members of the third parties have direct access to the data, so the offboarding of the identities is not performed correctly. So I think that should be wholesomely considered in the process of the entire third party program. I think it's pretty mature now, people are doing it, but that is one of the biggest mistakes I've seen in the past.
Yeah, I'll continue on that. The contract clause are really important. I see a lot of times they're missing some important clause. One, to rule them out of a process. We tend to take the cheapest bidder, and then they meet all the criteria. But one of the criteria should be security, and supply chain integrity should be the test. You look at them, and then if you don't, there's a score. The four other vendor have a better. We have a better confidence level, then we should go with them, even though they're a bit more expensive. So that's something I see a lot, and that's something we have, it's a bit of a cultural thing about going with the lowest bidder, and this is problematic in that space where some vendor will underbid anybody anytime just to get into your network. So this is a big problem we're seeing, and also to get out of contract. So if something happened while you're in contract with a company and they get breached, and then it gets really nasty and say, okay, we don't want to deal with this company anymore, then you need clause for that, exit clause, like I mentioned. And then also, one thing we hear is, so people say, well, we already use this product a lot, so adding a couple more is not going to change, the posture. So that's like something, okay, well, you're never going to get out of it. So this is a bit of an attitude that I think is not security in mind. I think those are the big one. Yeah, and doing it after, that's the thing also we see. A lot of people come to us, say, oh, we've procured this, we've installed it, and now we're wondering, okay, is this a problem? And then it's really harder to do, and then you need to figure out mitigation, and then sometimes mitigation is not possible. So that's also something that we see a lot. And also from a more practical, again, the methodology and all this, don't try to do it too perfect, and don't try, there's a way you can do this fairly quickly and brush it and say, okay, I don't think there's any red flag here. Is okay, we're probably good. Have that kind of approach in the methodology, and not just drill down on all those controls, and then you file this and you don't do anything about it because you need to do another one, and then those, make it practical, make it real, make it like it's useful, and other people's going to understand. Because if it's just a team of risk management, with control, they're the only one who understand those reports. So you need some sort of high-level dashboard that can say, okay, this vendor, here's their score. So I think those are the main one.
So we've heard about practicality. We've heard about timeliness. We've heard about managing products across their entire life cycle, from introduction to end-of-life removal and burial in the back. There's aspects of leadership that have to come in. And Do you really trust what your vendor is saying? You go out to their webpage and it says they're absolutely secure and you can trust us. Trust but verify. Okay, so I would now like to open it up to questions. This has been all great, but you have your own challenges, and we want to hear about them. So I want you to use and abuse these panelists and asking the toughest possible question you can. We have our first victim. Question.
Thank you. So my question is, generally when we think about third party, we tend to navigate towards a vendor definition, right? However, sometimes we have trusted connections with customers as well. How do we differentiate and how do we approach? And generally, most organizations don't put policies in place or have any ways to assess customers because the contract doesn't allow it. How would you approach that particular situation where instead of a vendor putting you at risk, now you have a customer putting you at risk?
So good question. I'm with the federal government, so we don't really have customers. So I'll leave you guys because you guys have customers.
So yes, good question. I think for my organization, yes, we do have customers. So I work for an investment bank and not a customer, but we call it counterparties. So we do have other investment banks which our bank does business, right? So there is a process in place, of course, before onboarding a process or a transaction process with another bank or a counterparty. It's not as extensive as we treat the third parties because it is an already established investment bank. They have their own processes. But yes, it is differently. It is at the business level. It does not get covered in the TPRM program. But yes, there is always a business level assessment and verification that happens. So it is different, but it is still verified. It's not blindly trusted.
So I'm in a financial institute in a bank, so our customers could be any of us, regular people leveraging the application from banking perspective. So the way that we approach it is two-way. One way is just having the awareness session, provide them with equip them with the tools and technology and what are the best practices, how they can surf internet, how they can secure do banking day to day. So there's some of those avenue to explore to make sure that they're trained and have the knowledge. The other avenue is that from the banking perspective, for example, for the identification, we have this risk-based approach in place. We look at their geolocation, IP, making sure that even they are vulnerable or uneducated people, at least their device is not out of date that they're trying to connect, or there is vulnerability in the machines that they're trying to just connect to the banking system. Is it they are subject to fraud? So there are some technology that we are leveraging, but we are mostly heavily relying on their awareness and education for the customers.
Yeah, and I've seen it where you can focus on technical aspects. You can establish a one-way trust where they trust you, but you don't trust them. Or you can set up APIs, right, for secure data, and you control that. But I would actually say my recommendation is to start putting it in that contract. And it sounds ugly, but what it does is it forces you to start having a conversation about security and trust with your customers. And even though they may only need a little bit now, in the future, you may have a tighter relationship. You may be involved with more data sharing, more exposure. So starting that conversation early is a good thing. And it's not something you should be afraid of. They should be able to trust you. And I'm always very wary of a vendor who doesn't want to talk about security. Okay. Great question, by the way. Great question. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. This is Raman for KPMG. I have a quick question for the panel here. In automobile industry, we have a concept of bill of materials. So are we bringing software bill of materials so that any vendor can share it with us when we're implementing that thing?
So software and hardware bill of materials. So let's expand this out for SBOMs and HBOMs. What are your thoughts on software bill of materials and hardware bill of materials? That's an ugly question. Thank you. No, you can't keep passing the microphone down. No,
It's a good question, and it's a really important topic. I'm with the Cyber Center, and we are exploring that right now. We are talking with some partners, and we are looking at the concepts, and we're talking with our American partner NIST, and to nominate them. So this is something we want to add to. So we talked about the supply chain and third party here today, but there's way more we can do on that space, and it's part of the cybersecurity framework. And SBOM is a big thing, and I think it's got a lot of value. HBOM, I kind of put them in the same thing. It's an aggregation of all your equipment, software, and hardware, and libraries and all this that you use, and this will help a lot in the cybersecurity as a whole. But in the supply chain, we don't drill that down in our assessment. But with this, when this gets implemented, and if it gets implemented the right way, we should have all these visibility when you buy a new product. You should have all the lists, and then you can correlate that with other databases where you say, okay, they use this library, and or they use that kind of hardware, which is not what I was expecting, and this, we might have some concern with that. So but we're not there yet, but we're looking into it. So.
I think you got your answer, or? Honestly, never explored this area, so not a lot to comment.
Yes, same in the financial institute, it's a different one.
Yeah. So when we look at different sectors, right, and we talked about automotive here, but if you look at healthcare sector and you look at the defense sector, the defense industry sector, SBOMs have been around for a very long time, and so have HBOMs. Now, they're not mature as we would like, and we're seeing the value. They are... Okay, let's just put it out on the table. They're a pain. They're a pain to create, they're a pain to maintain, and many organizations don't necessarily want to share that level of data. So figuring out who gets what access, it's a pain. The one thing I will say is it's coming. We've got sectors that are already having to do it, but other sectors, it's coming. And you have to think about it from two perspectives. One, you may be asking that of your vendors, and the other is vendors and partners may be asking that of you. So take the advantage while you have now, the time, get familiar with it because it's coming in some way, shape, or form. And it may be an incident in your environment that executives turn around and say, we have to do this, or we want to expand out to a new market. And the market requires you to do it. You don't want to start from zero, right? Have a good idea, good understanding. It's coming. Okay, next question. I'll start picking on people. Come on. Okay, over on this side, this is where I get brutal. Oh, right here. I know you have a question. Question? Yes.
He's better than me.
Oh, yes. Come on, we need a volunteer over here. Have you guys figured it all out?
I'll try, Ron. Just want to know links with cybersecurity and the way the enterprise is manage this in the governance. What links do you do with the enterprise architecture governance of your ecosystem?
All right, so what links to the infrastructure are we using to help manage this problem for insight, for oversight? What do you think?
I think one of the things that I've done, I think in the financial sector they're doing is that defining the key risk indicator for a third party. And if you look at it as an enterprise risk management framework, it should sit under the risk appetite that you define in the organization. So if you define those key risk indicator and there is a proper escalation and reporting and visibility to the management, everybody get their attention to what are the risky domains are, like what are the mitigation strategy and how we can handle it.
I think very similar. I briefly touched this point in one of the earlier questions that let's talk about the board, right? The board needs to be educated and be aware of this topic in the first place, right? To ensure that there is more attention on these topics, and KRIs is one of the very key things that we are also doing. I think for an organization to understand the level of risk appetite that they should take or they should have, it's very important that the board and the C-level executives, not the technical side, but the the CEO level side, people understand and know. And that's how we have the top-down approach of understanding this and then implement accordingly. But yes, awareness at that level is very important. Having very good key risk indicators is very important, and having a good governance setup, including what level of, let's say, operational committees or what level of steering committees and how many board meetings that a CISO or a CIO is able to attend and present the risk indicators and make the board aware of things is very important. So that's how it should be managed. That's how it should be. It's a two-way street, right? But more importantly, for it to be effectively implemented, it has to be top-down.
The way we do it in government really is I'll be really quick. Depending on the risk level, the approval is higher. So if the risk team doesn't do decision, they make risk assessment, then they bring the risk assessment to the business owner and they say, okay, this is high risk, you're going to need the CISO to sign off on it. So it's on them to go sell it to the CISO. But if it's low risk, then there's no, it's the director or whoever's got the budget to do it. So that's an approach we use in government. It works for us, but I'm sure it could work.
Fantastic question. Thank you. Please, a round of applause for our panelists for being up here. Thank you all. Some of us will be around if you've got any questions. Don't be shy. Thank you.